Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine.
I'm Bryce Duskett, and thank you for joining us today on Market Journal. As planting season continues around the Cornhusker State, we're sure glad that you found some time to join us on this week's episode. Kicking things off today, I mentioned planting season. It can certainly be a stressful time of year. For those in the agriculture industry, you know the stressors that come with the many occupations. Whether that stress comes from uncertainty in grain or livestock production, the markets, or the ever-changing weather, that stress can pile up quite quickly. A new webinar presented by UNL Center for Ag Profitability is seeking to help overwhelmed ag producers stress less. Farmers and ranchers know the importance of planning and talking about their financial well-being with bankers, financial planners, and their spouse. However, some might not realize just how important it is to spend time on their own mental health as well. This presentation is open for farm and ranch families to participate and provide some strategies for dealing with the stress of farming and ranching in today's challenging economic environment.
Ag producers have a lot more stress than the typical population because of the lack of things that they can control. They're not necessarily able to control their own commodity prices. They have so many of those other stressors that we had mentioned earlier. In addition to, farmers are generally more of a private individual and less likely to maybe seek help because they want to kind of hold things inside and bottle it up. And there's also just the stressors of holding on to a multi-generational farm and a lot of those things related to their pride. And with our farmers and ranchers, they identify themselves as a farmer or rancher. And so really having that link to the land and having that fear of potentially losing the farm can create a lot more stress because that really does define who they are.
While weather and commodity prices are variables that can't be directly controlled by ag producers, this webinar will highlight several examples of some common sense actions and strategies that are well within our power to dictate.
But we really, when we get wrapped up in the moment, we just need to take a step back and kind of realize that certainly getting just a well-balanced diet in, getting enough sleep to meet the demands of your body. Unfortunately, when farmers work such long hours, accidents are much more likely to happen when they're sleep deprived. You don't think quite as well. Trying to manage time efficiently and spending time with family and talking to somebody, whether that might be a friend, a relative, somebody just to confide in, to let people kind of know some of your concerns and stress level that you're having. And just taking some time off. It's extremely hard for our producers to do, especially those with livestock. But it doesn't have to be a long, week-long process or anything. Just trying to find a little bit of time to maybe engage in a hobby or take a quick little family afternoon vacation to do some of those types of strategies. So there's been a lot of research that's actually shown that the more gratitude you have and try to focus on things that are more positive in your life, the less likely you are to kind of dwell on some of those negative things going on.
Brandy also points out that it is not unusual for ag producers to find themselves in stressful situations. However, when that stress from those situations is left to linger for longer periods of time, depression and other mental illness can begin to manifest. If you'd like to take part of this webinar, it is free to view online at cap.unl.edu. We've also shared a direct link along with this story to the Market Journal website. As we turn our attention over to the grain markets now, this week we were joined by Doug Simon from Tredas. To begin the week, India's government confirmed that they would be banning wheat exports later this summer. Global buyers were banking on the world's second biggest wheat producer for their supplies for exports amid the ongoing war in Ukraine. And that's where we began the discussion with Doug on Wednesday morning.
Well, it's at the end of last week, we had a jump up in futures prices after the WASDE report, and part of it was about the wheat. But then when that came out, when they were going to ban exports, because India produces, surprisingly, they're the second largest producer of wheat in the world, produce about 105 million metric tons. The largest producer is actually China. They produce about 135 million metric tons of wheat, and European Union is about that same size. So those are the three biggest wheat producers in the world. But India was supposed to export maybe 9 million metric tons of wheat. Well, when they said that they're going to ban exports, and potentially maybe even have to import some wheat because it's been very dry over there, really got the wheat market that's already tight in a big tizzy. And so prices have up pretty aggressively this last week. I mean, we were up 82-cent range, I think, yesterday on Tuesday, and now this morning we're back down 50 cents.
Well, you mentioned that, and happening this week alongside that news is the annual wheat tour that hits parts of Nebraska, but largely the state of Kansas. And so far the reports that we've seen as we have this conversation today, about an expectation with what USDA is saying, pretty poor crop when it comes to winter wheat. All that tells you there's not enough wheat to meet the demand right now, right?
Right, and that's why we're seeing such volatile prices. We put in a high, like I said, yesterday, up in the upper $13 level. Had been down after the war broke out. We had kind of fallen back to 10. So we've seen a lot of volatility in the wheat market, and so everybody's trying to figure out how much is going to be exported, where it's going to come from. So there's just a lot of uncertainty, and it's coupled largely because of Ukraine. I mean, the Ukraine last year, produced 33 million metric tons of wheat, and they're saying that maybe they're only going to export, maybe raise 20 and maybe export maybe 10 million metric tons this year. So there's, between the corn and the wheat that's lost out of the Ukraine, out of a production standpoint and export side of it, our balance sheets, the export available supplies have tightened up pretty dramatically. And I think 3 months ago when this all broke out, I think that's what, right away you went to those bottom line balance sheets of how tight things could potentially get. And on the news this morning, listening, they were just talking about the United Nations permanent ambassador from the US was talking about world famine. Big issue for like North Africa and other places in the Middle East that import a lot of wheat. Where's it going to come from? If it's not going to come from Ukraine or Russia, India maybe, now not so much. So we've got ourselves in a tight market.
Mm-hmm. Back here domestically, when it comes to the row crops, I think if we looked at a word to summarize the planting season we've had so far, a lot of producers would say frustrating. Too wet, too dry. Now we're talking frost and snow in some places.
Yeah.
As you think about these planting conditions that people are trying to get the crop into right now, what does that tell you about the markets as we look to the trade through this growing season? It's
kind of representative. If you look at soil moisture across the U.S., it's wet in the eastern corn belt and up in the north, and then you go to the south and southwest, it's so dry. That's kind of the planting pace that we've seen. We were so dry out west that we couldn't plant, 3 weeks ago, and now we've been fortunate, been blessed with some rains, but it's still too wet up in the north. So it's created a lot of frustration. We're still about 50% planted on the corn crop. We're probably, about 20 points below, normal. Last Thursday, I was out up north, Wahoo, Hooper. It's like everywhere you look, there were multiple planters. We can plant this crop very fast. We've got some clients up in the Dakotas. They said, we're going to get it planted. There's some frustrations, but they're going to get it done. So I think the bigger picture is going to be as we go into the summer, what's the weather going to be like once we get the crop in the ground? And the forecasts are a little warm, a little dry. Through all the forecasts I see right now, which is not conducive for a record crop, I think there'll be a lot of worry as we go through the summer to see how that weather turns out, if we continue to get the moisture that we've had here lately.
Mm-hmm. Had a viewer question about the word recession. I want to avoid that. You mentioned a word I liked instead. You called it a drag on the economy. Give me your 2 cents of what you see right now. You expect a slowdown in the global economy and domestic economy as well?
Absolutely. Whenever you have inflation like that, we go back to 2008 when we had high housing prices and the mortgage-backed security crisis, and we had oil at 150 and gas was at $4. People's balance sheets, you're spending more on driving, you're spending more on interest, on homes. You don't have as much money to spend on other areas, and then it's going to be a drag on the economy at some point. The question is how, the banking industry is a lot more liquid, stable than it was in 2008, but it'll definitely have impact over time. I don't know if it's going to be a recession, but it's definitely going to be a drag on it. You're seeing that through the stock market right now. People are trying to determine what those earnings are going to be.
Thanks to Doug for his time this week. Coming up next week, we'll be joined by Jeff Peterson. He is the president of Heartland Farm Partners. If you have a question you'd like for me to ask Jeff, feel free to send us an email or get in touch on social media, and I'll be sure to pass those questions along. Eat beef, get rewarded. That certainly sounds like an easy campaign to get behind. The Nebraska Beef Passport program, now in its second year, encourages consumers to take a trip through Nebraska, eat beef, and possibly win some prizes. That passport was created by the Nebraska Beef Council. Adam Wegner is the director of marketing. We recently had the chance to sit down with him to learn more about this mouth-watering campaign. He first details the success they saw in 2021. Adam, as we talk about the Beef Passport program, you actually started this last year and saw quite a bit of success, didn't you?
We did. You know, if you think about 2021, that's when really people were starting to get back out visiting restaurants. Things were opening back up, and we thought it was a really great opportunity to showcase some of these smaller restaurants across the state that are serving great beef, and the timing was just perfect for people wanting to get out and get back into those restaurants.
So it's pretty simple how it works. I've got a copy of this year's Beef Passport in my hand here. People go to a restaurant, see they've got some specials on here and get a stamp for eating beef, and in the end they get rewarded, right? What are some of the prizes that the consumer can get?
Yeah, so it is a really simple concept, and we're just encouraging people to go out, try these different places. Like you said, every time they collect a stamp, they're entered to win one of our prize packages. This year we're giving away two $250 beef bundles that'll be fresh beef that'll be awarded to those winners. We also have a tiered system where if you get 5 stamps, you are entered to win a cutting board and a cook booklet. If you get 10 stamps, you get another set of prizes. So a lot of opportunities. Are going to be hundreds of prizes that are going to be sent out throughout the year. So almost everybody that does the passport, if they hit those tiers, are probably going to win something.
It's a fun way to get people interested in visiting some new places across the state of Nebraska in a passport way, and then have them getting those stamps. We've got the hard copy, as I showed folks here, but you also have a digital component that is new this year. How does that side of things work?
Well, the digital passport is something that's been really a convenience for consumers. So the idea is that you can now have the passport on your phone no matter where you go. You don't have to worry about forgetting it in the car or leaving it at home. And the passport is really simple. You actually don't even have to download an app. It's a system that you set up on your phone through a web browser. And then when you walk into the restaurant, you show your phone with your passport. A digital stamp is applied there by the restaurant staff, and you collect the stamps that way as well. It is important to note that you can use both. So we have some people that like to use the print, but if they forgot it at home, they can still get the stamps on their passport on their phone, and it all goes towards winning those same prizes.
How did you measure the success of the campaign last year, and what are some of your expectations for 2022?
Well, it's one of the neat things about having the digital passport this year is we can see the number of stamps that are being collected in real time, which has been really neat. We've had several hundred stamps that have already been collected on the mobile side, but when they send in the print passports, we also calculate that. So we know the number of stamps that are collected. Those stamps obviously relate to the number of beef meals purchased. We can take an average beef meal price, for instance, and come up with a number of sales that are associated with meals purchased through this passport. So it's really gauging the amount of beef that's being purchased and showing beef disappearance, if you will, through food service.
And that's great. I mean, obviously the Beef Checkoff is working to promote beef and beef consumption. For our producers out there that are watching this, talk about the opportunity you see in this and getting the consumer purchasing beef at those restaurants and ultimately learning more about beef production.
Yeah, I think that those two things really do go hand in hand. You know, people think about Nebraska and they think about beef production as the beef state, but they kind of forget that we have really great beef served all across the state. And so anytime that we have an opportunity to get in front of consumers, remind them of those opportunities to enjoy beef, whether it's in a small town or in a one of the key steakhouses in Omaha or Lincoln, that's a win for us. And so we just want to keep beef top of mind and keep it on the plate for consumers.
Obviously, this is a production of the Nebraska Beef Council and fits right in line with what you all do to promote beef here in Nebraska, but also on the national scale or national side of things. Talk about the efforts of the Beef Checkoff. Obviously, this is a fun promotion we can promote today, but broadly speaking, what else excites you right now?
Well, we have a lot of good things going on a national level. Of course, we've just entered into contract with Tony Romo to be a spokesperson for this summer. We're really promoting summer grilling, helping consumers understand how to purchase beef, what cuts to purchase for the grill, and then also obviously recipes and ways that they can put it on their plate. So I think using a spokesperson like Tony Romo with a national figure is going to be really good for us, and a good way for consumers to relate back to beef, and again, an encouragement for them to put it on their grill this summer.
A legendary brand, the Beef That's What's for Dinner campaign on the national side. Back here in Nebraska, though, if people want to learn more about the campaign we have this summer with the Passport, you've got a fun URL for that too, right? What is that?
That's right. So you can go to goodlifegreatsteaks.org, and that's got all the information about the Beef Passport. Of course, the Nebraska Beef Council website themselves, anybeef.org, will also have links to the Passport. But we've also seen a tremendous amount of interaction through our Facebook page. So if you go to Nebraska Beef Council on Facebook or look for hashtag GoodLifeGreatSteaks, you'll find all the information you need.
Thanks to Adam for his time this week. That website to learn more about that campaign is goodlifegreatsteaks.org. There you'll find a full list of the restaurants included in this year's Passport program, from the old Omaha stockyards to the rolling hills of the Sandhills. That Passport truly offers something for everyone. Moving on, with fuel prices at an all-time high, farmers are looking for ways to save on their fuel bills this season. University of Nebraska Tractor Test Laboratory Director Roger Hoy recently shared a few ways to save on fuel efficiency in farm equipment. That includes matching the tractor with the right job, reducing throttle, and choosing new tractors with specific operations in mind. You can read the full list of tips that he shared inside the most recent issue of the Nebraska Farmer. Well, it is now time for weather with Nebraska Extension Ag climatologist and Market Journal's chief meteorologist Al Dutcher. Al, it was another week with some spring-like weather. That included high temperatures, thunderstorms, and the possibility of frost for some. How are things shaping up as we turn to the week ahead?
Well, Bryce, we had some thunderstorm activity during this week, and now we're looking at the potential for some frost and scattered freezing temperatures across the northern plains and into some parts of Nebraska as we move through this weekend. We look at a summary of this last week. The major precipitation events, of course, occurred as we were on Tuesday. We had thunderstorms develop during the morning hours in central Nebraska, moving toward the northeast, and then we've seen that redevelopment as we got into the I-80 corridor from south central southwest Nebraska, eastward during the overnight hours into eastern Nebraska. And then, of course, we've seen the severe thunderstorm development and the widespread MCS, or mesoscale convective complex, develop across much of Iowa as we got into Thursday afternoon and into Friday morning, yesterday morning. We also seen some of that back build into portions of northeastern Nebraska. Unfortunately, a lot of the western part of the state missed out on much of these precipitation events. However, it did leave us the opportunity for those that are still trying to get crops planted to get out into the field without any more significant delays. So as we go through the next 7 days, we do have opportunities for a couple more precipitation events and dealing with some chilly weather. So let's take a look at the upper air models. The first thing I'll show your attention is that trough that is responsible for bringing some of the precipitation in southwestern Nebraska is now moving its way toward eastern Nebraska. The cold air to our north will start to fill in as we go through the overnight hours. It's a high pressure sliding in across the western portion of the Great Plains region, creating some upslope flow this morning, and that moisture is expected to continue to spread eastward during the daylight hours into the evening hours. And by tomorrow morning, we should see most of that jet core moving toward the Great Lakes region and high pressure settling in, bringing much cooler conditions. The precipitation shield itself will also shift off to the east, and we'll be looking at some very chilly conditions, probably some scattered frost, particularly the northwestern half of the state. And then as we go into Monday morning, we'll see another trough move across the northern plains. And the question is how much moisture will be associated with this system. At least from the GFS model standpoint, they are showing a little bit of convergence across the northern panhandle and southwestern portions of the state. Tuesday, this trough digs a little bit deeper, begins its eastward movement. We won't be seeing the bitter cold temperatures we will this weekend, but we will still remain consistently cooler than normal. And wherever that trough basically sags southward, we're going to see some precipitation. So it looks like south central, southeast, and east central Nebraska has a chance for some decent moisture as we go through the overnight hours. On Wednesday, most of that activity should start to shift toward the east. We'll see high pressure once again build in from the west, and that will bring a warming trend to western Nebraska, and we'll probably see that warming trend develop into eastern Nebraska as we get into Thursday. This high pressure system itself begins to shift slowly toward the east. So our temperatures will be basically back into the 80s and potentially even some lower 90s in the southwestern part of the state as the major precipitation pattern continues to shift off toward the eastern seaboard. On Friday, the GFS model is trying to hint at the development of an upper air to low pressure system over portions of eastern Oklahoma. If this does develop, that will help to bring some moisture northward. And whether or not that intersects with this area up in the northern Rockies remains to be seen, but there is some hints that this low pressure system may cut off somewhat and bring some moisture up at least into southwest or southeastern Nebraska. As we look farther into the future, the 8 to 14 day forecast next Thursday is the following Tuesday. That includes a Memorial Day weekend. Above normal temperatures are expected, below normal in the Pacific Northwest. In terms of precipitation, below normal precipitation with normal to above to the northern plains. Looking farther out in the future, the next 3 months, looks like above normal temperatures centered over the western United States and below normal precipitation from the northern plains all the way into the southern plains.
Thanks, Al. As he mentioned, temperatures continue to rise, and as they do so, pasture fly populations will continue to grow as well. With that in mind, hornfly control measures may need to be implemented as soon as possible in order to avoid any economic injury levels from impacting your cattle. Market Journal's Bill Dodd recently caught up with an extension educator to discuss how fly populations can impact your herd and how you can help mitigate any negative effects on your cattle.
The hornfly has been and continues to be one of the most highly impacting pasture flies livestock producers have had to deal with in the United States. As we prepare to enter summer months, the economic injury levels for cattle could become a valid concern among cattle producers.
Research done here at Nebraska and other places in the country and Canada have shown that weaning weights of calves can be impacted anywhere from 12 to 20 pounds. Now, the hornfly can also impact yearling cattle, stockers, and replacement heifers, and that impact can be up to 18%. So it's really a problematic fly, and numbers build rather quickly. Can go from egg to adult in about 14 days. So what you get over the summer is overlapping fly generations. And then as we move through the summer towards late August, early September, you see huge populations of hornflies that sometimes can often exceed 2,000 flies per animal. Producers need to provide some type of fly control, and as you reach that end point of summer, you may have to alter your current fly control methodologies or try to improve the efficacy somehow to reduce the stress on the animals and improve animal welfare.
When it comes to mitigation of these pests, there are a number of tools available for producers to choose from. However, making sure you're keeping fly populations below that threshold for economic injury will be imperative.
Well, we have a series of products. We can go back to the dust bags of the old days that were used very, very successfully and still can be used successfully, especially if they're set up in a forced use arrangement where the animals have to walk, say, through an alleyway and get in contact with the dust bag. Back rubbers and oilers are still very popular because it allows the animals to satisfy their need to scratch. So the animals will kind of rub up against them. But here again, to get maximum effect from a back rubber or an oiler, they really need to be forced use. Animal sprays have actually increased in popularity over the last 5 to 10 years, and they can be applied using several different types of sprayers. Pour-ons have been used quite a bit and are still very, very popular. They will have to be retreated through the season if you exclusively use a pour-on. Feed additives and insect growth regulators have been very popular for the last 20 years. Insecticide ear tags have been out and around for over 30 years. We encourage people who want to use an insecticide ear tag is to delay long as possible before applying that ear tag. And in my studies, I found that delaying application until about the last week of May or the first week of June will give you the most impact from that particular delivery method. And then lastly is a hornfly trap. It's a walk-through trap. Hornflies are attracted to light, so automatically they will fly up to the top of the trap and be caught there and captured. So we're seeing a lot of people who want to raise their animals organically or naturally kind of gravitate to this type of fly control.
While moisture is key for the development of these particular flies, we could be on the threshold of a decrease in population as we've experienced more arid conditions as of late. However, we should still be vigilant.
So we could actually see a shift in the stable fly pressure this year if it remains a little bit more wet than we've seen it in the last couple of years. Last summer was a good indicator where we had very dry conditions and we had fewer pasture stable fly numbers than in the previous couple of years. The face fly problem can be problematic, especially in the eastern part of the state where there's higher moisture and more bountiful rainfall. So those face flies will probably be coming out here very soon. And the producers should need to be on the lookout for face flies also.
Cattle producers should check on their cattle weekly during fly season in order to ensure that economic injury level is not being encroached upon. This can usually be done when checking salt and mineral. Whatever your plan of attack, fly season is upon us, and the time to be mindful of their impacts on your cattle is now. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd.
Thanks for that story, Bill. Dave also tells us as the temperatures in early fall months have increased over the last several years, it may be necessary to continue mitigation practices through the month of September. If you'd like to learn more about horn fly mitigation, we've included a link to an informative article along with this story to that handy Market Journal website. Well, that is going to do it for this week's show. If you missed a story, be sure you've subscribed to Market Journal on YouTube. We post all our stories to that channel, including some bonus content. Here's to another safe and productive week. We hope to see you back here next time. Until then, I'm Bryce Duskett. Thanks for watching.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.